Sometimes your instincts notice something long before your mind can explain it. You sense that a man feels differently around you, but you cannot point to one exact reason. That does not always mean you are right, but it also does not mean you are imagining things. Very often your brain is quietly collecting dozens of tiny details before you become aware of them. Now you finally have words for some of those moments. You know to notice whether his pupils seem larger in normal lighting when he looks at you. You know to notice whether his feet naturally stay pointed towards you even while he is talking to someone else. You know to notice whether his hand drifts to his jaw or the back of his neck right after you say something that catches him by surprise. And you know to notice whether his chest and shoulders naturally turn toward you instead of staying angled away, not just his head, his whole upper body. When several of these signals appear together again and again, they often become much more meaningful than any one sign by itself. They are usually not carefully planned moves or clever tricks. They are natural reactions that happen before someone has fully organized their thoughts into words. Keep watching, because understanding these signals is only half of the story. What you choose to do next is where everything can change. Knowing that someone may like you is actually the easier part. The difficult part is deciding how to respond without overthinking every moment. This is where many opportunities quietly disappear. Someone notices the signs, they feel the connection, they believe something is there. Then they wait. They wait for the other person to say something first. They wait for the first message. They wait for the first invitation. They wait for the perfect moment that never seems to arrive. Sometimes that works out, but sometimes the man is feeling exactly the same uncertainty. He may also be looking for small signs that it is safe to move forward. He may be wondering if his feelings are welcome, or if he is completely misunderstanding the situation. If both people spend all their time waiting, that exciting moment slowly fades away without either person ever knowing what could have happened. That is why reading body language should never become a guessing game or a reason to jump to conclusions. Instead, let it become a gentle reminder to stay open, present, and aware. The next conversation worth having is not simply about recognizing attraction. It is about understanding how to respond with confidence while still respecting yourself. And trust me, that is a topic that deserves a full conversation all by itself. So the next time you find yourself wondering how a man really feels, do not focus only on every word he says. Words matter, but they are only one piece of the picture. Pay attention to the little things that happen naturally. Notice his eyes when the lighting is clear. Notice where his feet settle when he is standing close by. Watch what his hands do after you surprise him with a joke, a compliment, or a thoughtful comment. Notice whether his chest keeps turning back toward you, even when there are other people around. None of these signs alone can tell you exactly what someone is feeling, and they should never replace honest communication. But together they can offer quiet clues that help you understand the moment a little better. Human connection is often built from many small signals instead of one dramatic confession. And sometimes those signals begin long before anyone has the courage to say what is really on their mind. That is why paying attention can be so powerful. The body often speaks first. The heart usually follows. The words simply arrive later. Once you start seeing these patterns, ordinary conversations may suddenly feel very different. You may realize that someone has been revealing far more than you ever noticed before. And that awareness alone can completely change the way you understand attraction, connection, and the silent language people speak every single day. A lot of men will deny their feelings long before they ever admit they like you. That is just how it often happens. They will act as if everything is completely normal, as if nothing is different, as if you are simply another person they know. Meanwhile, many women spend hours trying to figure out what is really going on. They reread messages, ask friends for advice, replay conversations in their minds again and again, hoping to find one clear answer. But here is something most people never explain. While he is carefully choosing his words and trying not to reveal too much, several parts of his body may already be telling a very different story. They quietly reveal what he is feeling without him even realizing it. Once you know what to look for, you may stop second-guessing every conversation and start noticing small details that have always been there. Stay with me, because what comes next might completely change the way you read someone's behavior. And this is the surprising part. Women are usually not bad at reading people at all. In fact, many are naturally good at noticing emotions. The real problem is that they have often been taught to focus on the wrong things. They are told to pay attention only to his words. Listen to what he says. See if he calls. Watch if he keeps his promises. Of course, those things matter, and consistent actions always matter the most, but words are also the easiest thing for someone to control. A man can think before he speaks. He can choose safe answers. He can hide behind a calm voice. His body, however, does not always cooperate. It reacts automatically in ways that have been part of human behavior for a very long time. Those natural reactions can quietly reveal feelings even when he is trying his best to keep them hidden. Keep watching, because the first sign is one that many people completely miss. Research on human communication has often suggested that words make up only a small part of how people express themselves. A much bigger part comes from body language, facial expressions, posture, movement, and tiny unconscious reactions. That means a man could be standing right in front of you, acting as though he feels absolutely nothing, while his body is quietly sending signals that tell a very different story. And I want to be completely fair here. None of these signs should ever be treated as proof that someone is in love or deeply interested. People show emotions differently, and context always matters. Still, these small behaviors can become interesting clues when they appear together with consistent actions over time. Speaking from experience, I have caught myself doing many of the things I am about to describe without even noticing. Looking back, it almost feels funny because I thought I was hiding my feelings well, but my body was probably making everything obvious. That is exactly why these signals are worth understanding. They are usually not planned. They are not secret tricks that men use to send hidden messages. They are simple reactions that happen when someone feels nervous, excited, or emotionally drawn toward another person. Sometimes the man himself does not even realize he is giving anything away. So let's begin with the first signal, because once you notice it, you may start seeing it almost everywhere. It has to do with his eyes, but not in the obvious way that everyone talks about. There is one small detail inside the eyes that many people overlook, and it can reveal much more than a long conversation ever could. Don't miss this next part because it is fascinating. Most people already know that eye contact can show interest, but there is something even more subtle happening inside the eyes themselves. When a man feels genuinely attracted to someone, his pupils can naturally become larger. The small dark circle in the middle of the eye expands without any conscious effort. He cannot decide to make it happen or stop it from happening. It is controlled by the nervous system, the same system that manages your heartbeat, your breathing, or the sudden rush you feel when something unexpected happens. When the brain notices someone it finds especially interesting or attractive, it may respond by allowing the pupils to widen so the eyes take in more information. It is one of those quiet reactions that often happens before a person even understands what they are feeling. Of course, lighting, emotions, and many other factors can also change pupil size, so this should never be viewed by itself. But when it appears together with warm eye contact, genuine attention, relaxed body language, and consistent respectful behavior, it can become one more interesting piece of the puzzle. That is why understanding body language is never about chasing one magical sign. It is about noticing patterns that repeat naturally over time. And trust me, the next signal is even harder to fake because it often appears before a single word is spoken. Once you notice it, ordinary conversations may never look quite the same again. When someone feels genuinely drawn to another person, the brain often reacts before words ever catch up. One interesting response is that the pupils may naturally become larger, almost as if the eyes are trying to take in every little detail. Studies on eye behavior have found that people often experience this reaction when they are looking at someone they find especially attractive or emotionally engaging. The important thing is that this is not something a person chooses to do. No one can simply decide to make their pupils expand. You cannot train yourself to control it, and you cannot switch it on whenever you want. It either happens naturally or it does not. That is why many people consider it one of the more honest body language signals. Even more interesting, this response can continue while the attraction remains active during the interaction. So, if you are talking with a man and, in normal lighting, his eyes seem unusually deep or noticeably darker whenever he looks directly at you, there may be more happening beneath the surface than either of you realizes. Of course, lighting matters. In darker places, almost everyone's pupils become larger because that is how human eyes adjust. But in daylight, inside a coffee shop, at work, or walking outside, Larger pupils can sometimes reflect genuine emotional interest. That alone should never be treated as proof of attraction. But when it appears together with warm attention, relaxed body language, and consistent behavior, it becomes another small clue worth noticing. Stay with me, because the next sign is one that almost nobody pays attention to, yet once you see it, you may never overlook it again. I remember hearing about a woman who had been spending time with a man for several weeks. She kept asking herself the same question over and over. Does he actually like me, or is he simply being friendly? She described him as incredibly difficult to read. His words never gave much away. Then one afternoon they were sitting near a large window with plenty of natural light. Every time he looked directly at her, his eyes seemed noticeably darker than before. At that moment she thought nothing of it. She simply believed he had striking eyes. Much later, after learning more about natural body language, she remembered that afternoon differently. Suddenly those little details made much more sense. Whether that single sign meant anything by itself is impossible to know, but combined with everything else he consistently showed through his actions, it became one small piece of a much bigger picture. Eventually they built a relationship, and years later she still remembers that quiet moment because it was there long before either of them openly admitted how they felt. But the eyes are only the beginning. The next signal shifts your attention to a completely different part of the body, one that most people never think about watching. Once you understand it, you may find yourself noticing it everywhere. Keep watching, because this next one often speaks before a single sentence does, and that makes it surprisingly difficult to fake. One of the most overlooked parts of body language is something almost everyone ignores completely: the feet. It sounds simple, but it is surprisingly revealing. Experts who have spent years studying human behavior often point out that people become very good at controlling their faces. They learn how to smile politely, keep a calm expression, maintain eye contact, and hide nervousness. But almost nobody thinks about controlling where their feet are pointing. That is why the lower body sometimes reveals intentions more honestly than the face ever could. If a man feels comfortable and interested while talking with you, his feet will often naturally turn toward you. Even if he is standing in a group and speaking with someone else, his feet may quietly remain pointed in your direction. It is as though his body has already chosen where it wants to be before his mind catches up. If you are sitting together instead of standing, notice his knees instead. They often lean the same way his feet would if they were visible. The message is similar. The body naturally orients itself toward what captures attention. On the other hand, if someone keeps pointing toward the door or another part of the room while talking, it can sometimes suggest their attention is already moving elsewhere. That does not always mean rejection, because people leave for many reasons, but it is still an interesting detail to notice when combined with everything else. And believe me, the next signal becomes even more fascinating, because it usually appears during the exact moment someone is trying hardest to stay calm. I actually laughed at myself once after realizing I had done this without even noticing. I was at a work gathering talking with several people when a woman I secretly liked walked into the room. I kept pretending to focus on the conversation in front of me. I thought I was doing a great job hiding my interest. Later, one of my friends smiled and asked me a simple question. "Did you know your feet stayed pointed toward her the entire time?" I had absolutely no idea. Without realizing it, my body had already revealed exactly where my attention was. That moment stayed with me because it reminded me how often unconscious behavior speaks louder than carefully chosen words. And if that surprised you, this next signal may surprise you even more. Most people dismiss it as nothing more than a nervous habit. They think it is random. They barely notice it happening. But it can sometimes be one of the clearest signs that someone is emotionally affected by the person standing in front of them. We are talking about the hands. More specifically, the small moments when a man touches his jaw, brushes his lips, rubs the back of his neck, or lightly touches his face while speaking with you. At first it looks completely ordinary, but there is much more happening beneath those simple movements than most people ever realize. And once you understand why, you will start seeing those little gestures in a completely different way. One of the easiest signals to miss happens with the hands. Watch what he does when he is around you. Does he touch his jaw, brush his lips, rub the back of his neck without thinking? Those little movements may seem meaningless, but sometimes they are not. When a man feels genuine attraction, his body can enter a mild state of emotional excitement. It is not the kind of stress that feels dangerous. It is the kind that appears because someone suddenly matters. His heart may beat a little faster. His senses become more alert. His nervous system becomes slightly more active because his brain has decided this moment is important. One natural way the body tries to calm itself is through self-touch. Lightly touching the face, neck, or jaw can create a small soothing effect that helps reduce that internal tension. Research on social behavior has found that these self-touch gestures often increase during emotionally meaningful conversations, especially when attraction is involved. That does not mean every neck rub or face touch equals romance. People have many habits. But when these gestures repeatedly appear right after something you say or during moments when the conversation becomes more personal, they become much more interesting. Keep watching because this is where the pattern starts becoming impossible to ignore. It is never about one isolated movement. It is about several small reactions happening together, quietly telling a story that words have not caught up with yet. A friend once told me about a man she had been seeing casually. He seemed confident almost all the time. He spoke comfortably with everyone around him. But she noticed one strange little habit. Every time she teased him, made him laugh unexpectedly, or said something slightly playful, his hand immediately reached for the back of his neck. Every single time. At first she assumed it was simply something he always did, but after paying closer attention, she realized it only happened during those moments when she caught him emotionally off guard. That is what made the difference. It was not random at all, it had a trigger. The trigger was her. His body kept responding before his mind had time to hide it. The funny part was that he had absolutely no idea he was doing it. Later she admitted she even tested it a few times with another playful comment, just to see if the same reaction happened again. And sure enough, there it was. The hand went right back to his neck. That is why context matters so much. One gesture alone means very little. A repeated gesture connected to the same emotional moments can tell a much bigger story. But the final signal is the one many people overlook completely, and once you notice it, it becomes one of the clearest signs of genuine interest. Stay with me, because this last one often reveals more than the other three combined. The last signal involves the entire upper body. It is often called fronting, which simply means turning the front of your body towards someone. It sounds almost too simple to matter, but it can reveal a great deal. Think about how people naturally behave when they feel uncomfortable or guarded. They often angle their bodies away. They cross their arms. They protect their chest and stomach without even realizing it. The front of the body contains many areas people instinctively shield when they feel unsafe or emotionally distant. But when someone feels comfortable, interested, and emotionally engaged, the opposite often happens. Their chest faces you, their shoulders square toward you. Their upper body naturally opens instead of closing off. Studies on social interaction have shown that people who feel genuine interest often turn their whole body toward the person they are focused on, rather than keeping themselves at an angle. It is a subtle but powerful difference. If a man keeps facing you fully while talking, even when there are other distractions around him, that can be a meaningful clue. If you are sitting beside each other and he turns his whole torso toward you instead of only moving his head, it often shows that his attention is fully invested in the moment. And once you begin noticing this behavior, you may realize it appears far more often than you ever expected. I remember seeing this during a dinner with several friends. There were 6 people around the table, and one man had mentioned a woman a few times before, though he insisted nothing was going on. Throughout the evening he talked with everyone. The conversation moved around the table naturally, yet every time he spoke, his chest and shoulders kept turning toward her. Even when he answered someone sitting on the opposite side, his upper body slowly drifted back in her direction. It almost looked effortless, like his body had chosen its favorite place without asking permission from his mind. Later I mentioned it to him. At first he laughed and said there was no way. Then I described exactly what I had noticed. He paused for a moment before quietly admitting, "Maybe I do like her." The interesting part was that everyone else had already guessed it long before he finally said the words. His body had been revealing it all evening, and that brings everything together. Real attraction rarely depends on one dramatic signal. It usually appears as several quiet signs working together. The eyes become more focused. The feet naturally point toward you. The hand reaches for the neck or jaw after an emotional moment. The chest stays turned in your direction. When two or three of these behaviors appear together consistently, they become much harder to dismiss as coincidence. That is also why paying attention to body language is never about trying to read minds or making quick assumptions. It is about noticing repeated patterns instead of chasing single moments. Research on attraction in everyday social settings has found that people who successfully connect with others are often not the loudest or the most obvious. They are simply the ones sending many small, steady, natural signals that quietly build over time. Most people completely overlook those tiny details. Yet the person those signals are meant for often senses something long before they can explain why. Have you ever met someone and immediately felt an unexplainable pull toward them? Sometimes that feeling comes from your brain picking up dozens of subtle behaviors without your conscious mind realizing it. Tiny movements, small changes in posture, gentle shifts in attention. Your mind processes far more information than you notice. That is why attraction can sometimes feel almost impossible to describe. The body often begins speaking before words arrive. And that is exactly why actions will always matter more than carefully chosen sentences. So the next time you find yourself wondering how someone really feels, do not rush to judge one smile or one glance. Instead, watch the complete picture. Because when the body keeps telling the same story again and again, it is often revealing something words are still trying to hide. And trust me, once you start noticing these quiet patterns, you may never look at a conversation the same way again.